I produced an episode of this show called roughly Top 10 Gundams and was subsequently asked, sometimes nicely, sometimes not so much, to put together a Top 10 non-Gundam mobile suit list too. So here we go. It's worth noting that a fair few of you got super ultra mega butthurt over the last video, not including certain shows or actually including certain shows. Well, some of you will be happy about this situation, some of you will not. And if you don't dig the way I do this, feel free to leave your own list and tell me what a scrub I am. I promise that I will totally pay attention to this and not just delete your comment out of hand. Scout's honor. Anyway, a couple rules for the list as usual. 1. It has to be from an actual Gundam anime. No MSVs or other variants, no matter how cool you or I think they are. 2. No mobile armors. These are a class of their own and may yet wind up on their own list, though it may be a little bit on the short side. No promises, though. 3. This is my list. You can get all up in arms all you want, but that won't change the fact that if I don't like a unit, it ain't popping up on here, damn it. And don't worry, no suits from Gundam Build Fighters are on here. Enough of you lost your shit over that I won't do it again, at least not until the next time I actually do it. Number 10. Quinn Mantha. This one straddles the line between mobile suit and mobile armor, but it's officially called a mobile suit, so in it goes. Piloted by one Puru 2, a cyber new type and clone, she used it against the forces of the AU during the first Neo-Zeon War. If you don't know what the first Neo-Zeon War is, go watch Gundam Double Zeta. The machine came equipped with 30 funnels, an extraordinary amount to deal with. It aped the old MSN-02 Zeong in its use of all-range attacks and the detachable head, with a 13-megawatt particle cannon in it. It also carried 6 more megaparticle cannons on its torso to further add to its destructive capacity. Equipped with an I-field generator to defend against incoming attacks, the machine seemed nearly indestructible. But a mobile suit is only as good as its pilot. Remember that. Number 9. The Zaku 2. Oh, the venerable MS-06. In either its space or ground configurations, it will always have a place in my heart, somewhere next to all the souls of damned children. The machine didn't have a whole lot in the way of firepower or in combat ability, but it could hold its own pretty well against any other grunt machine in the Gundam timeline. Sporting machine guns and missiles and bazookas, the machine can't power beam weaponry on its own. It does carry a Heat Hawk for close engagements, but the machine does not have a whole ton of power to bring to the field. However, the machine was able to stand up against most tanks and aircraft at the time, and was really only vulnerable to other mobile suits. Blasting its way through the Earth forces, the Zaku 2 was the reason the Zeon took over so much of our blue planet. Combine this with ease of repair and customizability, and you have a real reliable workhorse of a mobile suit. It's so iconic that it was resurrected in different series repeatedly over the years, like the Zaku Warrior from Seed Destiny, and the Bajornan from Turn A, and the whatever the hell that thing is from Double O. It just goes to show that you can't keep a good mobile suit down. Number 8. The Jin. If there's one thing that can be said about the Zaku 2, it's that it somewhat lacks panache. That's where the Jin comes in. While Gundam Seed has some rather revolting and glaring problems with it, the Jin is not one of them. The mobile suit designs of that series are pretty solid, though most of the Gundam designs are above average at best. The Jin, on the other hand, looks like it should belong to a commander, but it is the standard unit produced by Zaft against the Earth forces. The machine looks much more intimidating than the somewhat plain Zaku 2, and features all of the same bells and whistles that makes me a happy bunny to see. It's got all the same kit that Zaku's have, and could even attempt to mount a sort of beam rifle with limited success. It could also use a launcher that fired missiles bigger than it was, which always earns points for me in the big stupid weapons department. If it had been in somewhat of a less odious series, it would probably be further on down the list, but alas, mostly it's in stock footage. And I'm sure about half of you just turned off the video. Number 7. The MS-18E Camphor is about as nasty of a shock attack mobile suit as can be. Everything the Zaku 2 could feasibly equip, this machine came equipped with as standard. The unit carried 2 shotguns, a first for the Gundam series, 2 bazookas, 2 Sturmfausts, and a generator that could handle beam sabers. It was easy enough to disassemble for covert ops that the Cyclops team lifted it in under the noses of the Fed forces onto the colony Libot. Joke's on you, Feddies! Covert ops with a mobile suit is kind of a misnomer, isn't it? Anyway, the only trade-off was that the thing had tissue paper for armor, which meant that it could accidentally get killed by a stray missile, and continuous fire would eat through it like the current US government eats through tax money. And there goes the other half of my viewing audience. So tragically, the camphor gets shot down too fast to get much higher on the list. Maybe next time, lay off the booze, Misha. Number 6. The Hyakushiki. The Type 100, piloted by Quattro not Char-Aznable Vegeta, is every bit as stylish and slippery as it looks. The machine was based on a concept for the Delta Gundam, however, it is not officially called a Gundam, so it's on this list instead of the other one, thank you very much. It incorporates most of the thing that made the Zeta and Mark II so special, with a lighter build and anti-beam coating to top it off. Not that Char-Aznable thought for a minute he'd be hit while piloting it. The machine follows along with the idea of how mobile suit development would likely go, being the testbed for what mobile suits in the future would likely involve. It could also equip what was essentially a giant beam cannon to fry anything in its way. The story behind the suit is that it was a rejected design by Mamoru Nagano for Zeta, but since it lacked the capacity to transform in the way they wanted it to, it almost ended up in the scrap heap. It did, however, manage to grab everyone's attention to the point that it showed up more than once in Gundam Build Fighters and Gunpla Battles beginning cubes out of whatever that's called, as the Byakushiki and the Mega Shiki, both showing the capacity of the mobile suit to enrapture the imagination and prove its own mettle. And you thought I wouldn't get any Build Fighters in here. Joke's on you. However, because of its striking design, it almost overshadowed the lead character's mech, and that simply won't do. However, the next entrant on our list did what it was supposed to just fine. Number 5. The Rigazi. The RGZ-91 was the not quite Gundam for Char's counterattack. The placement of this particular unit may surprise those of you who watched the last video, and you'd be forgiven for thinking it might end up higher on the list. But as much as I love the Rigazi, or Refined Gundam Zeta, which is not actually a Gundam incidentally, I can recognize the inherent weaknesses even in a good design. It is a sleek, stylish redesign of a solid but somewhat over-designed suit and bumps up the overall size and armament of the unit. The machine boasts extra built-in weaponry and lacks the fragile transformation component that the Zeta, Double Zeta, and Mathos all had to contend with. Instead, it has a back weapon system that allows it greater mobility without sacrificing armor like the other shape-changing suits at the time. However, this also made it prohibitively expensive to make and was scrapped after the Second Neo-Zeon War. It is an A+ redesign that really should be the standard for how to make an imposing, powerful unit without being powerful enough to play the main character. It is, for me, the perfect iteration of the secondary protagonist. And unfortunately, with the Neo-Zeon Wars mostly over, there's not much chance that it's going to show up again. Number 4. Goof Custom. The original Goof was fairly imposing, but by the time 1996 rolled around, it wasn't quite the top dog it had been, especially considering the units that had come through in the interim, like the Kampfer and the Gelgoog. So taking into consideration the reimaginings that most of the early Zeon mobile suits had gone through, the Goof Custom was born. And boy, was it a mean customer. The machine's color scheme was updated to a more sky blue, and its already fearsome appearance was further enhanced by streamlining and further tinkering with the design to remove the more corny elements like the finger guns and the thick whip, and replaced it with slightly more hard sci-fi weapons. And don't even try to argue with me about Gundam being anything remotely close to hard sci-fi. The point is that it's much harder than the original squishy soft Goof. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they gave it a giant rotary cannon attached to the shield to make it all the sweeter. The machine ran roughshod over a unit full of special issue machines and killed several heavily armored gun tanks before they finally brought it down in hand-to-hand. It is a nasty machine, and only aces get to use it because otherwise it wouldn't be fair. Number 3. The Jinx. Now, I didn't put any designs from Gundam 00 on the last list, but don't think that means I forgot about it. I may not be hot on the designs of the Gundams themselves, but the Jinx units I have to say I really love. They are the perfect foils to the Gundam units in that series in every sort of way, including their drab, menacing colors, their scowling and inhuman face, and their red particle streams that do pretty awful things to people that survive them. The design is intended to be ominous and not nearly so heroic as the Gundams in 00 tended to look, and were the first legitimate threat the Gundams faced in the series. They could stand toe-to-toe with them in land and space, and the experienced pilots behind the sticks were more than familiar with their foes. Given how easily the Gundams had chewed through the other machines in the show, this immediate and imposing threat made the Jinx, spelled GN-X, all that more appealing. It's probably the best mass-produced unit created in the history of Gundam for my money by sheer specs alone, and even though the Jinx 3 came along and ended up being properly mass-produced, it still lacks the great style that the original Jinx has, along with the perfect bad guy look that the Jinx carries. And with that, that is all of the mass-produced mobile suits on this list. Everything else is aces or prototypes. Ready yet? Get set. Here we go. Number 2, the Tall Geese. Sort of spending the majority of its operational life picking on mechs smaller than it is, the Tall Geese is a pretty brilliant design. It's simple, elegant, and looks precisely like it was the predecessor to the other mobile suits that were produced in Gundam Wing. The Gundams look almost like intruders from another design document comparatively, but its speed and power combine to make a deadly fighter that excels in hand-to-hand, and it can execute daring high-speed attacks that only crazy or suicidal pilots can handle. Characters like Zex Marquise, for example. Considering what happens to his outlook later on in the series, you have to wonder if piloting the Tall Geese against the Gundams might have rattled a few brain cells loose. But the machine he battles in is the kind of monster that would make for a perfect chivalric knight against the lone swordsman that the Gundam pilots are. One might even say that it's a suit designed for dueling. And the line refused to die there. When Treisco Shernada needed a war machine to get in to lead the Earth against the Libra, he chose his own personalized Tall Geese, complete with a beam cannon and a fancy headdress. And finally, the Tall Geese 3 had a heat rod like the Epion, as well as a mega beam cannon, all spec'd out to Zex's liking. The suit was nearly as indestructible as its legacy, and its no-frills look slides it into number 2. Number 1. See, I remember this time. The Sazabi. Come on, it had to be this one. The biggest, baddest mobile suit on the block. The penultimate suit used by Char Aznable throughout the Second Neo-Zeon War, it boasted a wide array of new type weaponry. In addition to the 6 funnels that it carried on its back, it carried a beam shot rifle, which it was never quite clear what it did, but it was certainly nasty. And it had all sorts of hidden beam sabers hiding all over it, in the forearms, in its shield, where it carried also a beam axe that could transform into a beam saber, and right in the middle of its tight little stomach, giving it a very weirdly hourglass figure, it carried an enormous beam cannon that chewed through enemy mobile suits like paper, butter paper. Well, you get the point, I'll not torture the metaphor any further. The machine was every bit as devious as Char himself, who, in spite of his experiences and character development all throughout Zeta Gundam, was still kind of that same 20-year-old young man who still missed Lala Soon. And in doing so, he created something that was a throwback to everything that he remembered from the 1-Year War. The implanted beam cannons, the cockpit was in the head, the headdress was just like the helmet he used to wear. Everything about this screams Char Aznable, but it also screams kind of overcompensating. But at the same point, I can't really fault him, because that man, for all of his coolness and all of his skill at piloting, was still extremely damaged 13 years later. War is hell, kids. The legacy of the Sazabi is just as good as the Hyakushiki, and it also ended up in 2 different versions of Gundam Build Fighters. Once as the white Sazabi that remained mostly unnamed in Gunplug Builders Beginning G, and as the Miss Sazabi, which is a slimmed-down version piloted by Ayla Jyrkiainen at the end of Gundam Build Fighters 1. And for the sake of completeness, I will also say it spawned the Sinanju sometime later from Gundam Unicorn. But much like the pilot, I will always say, stick with the one and the only original. Well, that just about wraps it up. Let's see what the comments have to say about this list.
What the fuck?
We'll see you next time, folks.